As the vanguard entered the ominous hole, Han checked to see if there were any monsters. At the moment, the nest seemed to be quiet as a tomb. When the vanguard was deep enough into the nest, Ha-Yun indicated the next group to enter. Looking at the next group, which was composed of nobles, he saw that they walked with more confidence, though they did seem to have some caution. Compared to the nobles, the next group walked in a jerky manner. Their fears only served to hinder their movements. Luckily, Han didn't see monsters that were close to the entrance. When it was his group's turn to enter the nest, Han looked at the walls of the tunnels. There seemed to be a mixture of claw marks and burns. Between the rocks, there were glowing streaks of blue that lit up the inside of the tunnel. Based on the look of the nest, there must have been either colossal monsters or many monsters that built this nest, and maybe they had left behind some type of residue to help illuminate the tunnel system. His footsteps reverberated as he walked further into the slanting tunnel, causing loose rocks to fall downhill and creating more noise. The way noise was so easily carried, the biggest concern was whether the monsters would hear their passage. As a learning opportunity, this would be effective at giving people valuable experience. Sometimes, the best lessons are those that are learned in horrific moments. "Where do you think the monsters are at?" Celine spoke to no one in particular, her voice quivering. One of the guys in his group looked back at her and said, "You should be hoping that we don't see a monster." "Why do you think that?" Celine asked the guy, grateful for the distraction. "Even though each of us has some experience at fighting, do you think we'll have the ability to fight so many monsters? This seems more like a suicide mission instead of a class lesson. I don't know what the academy is thinking, sending us into this mess," the guy grumbled. The guy next to him drove his elbow into the guy and spoke, "Shut your mouth, Lilith. This place is terrifying enough without us having to listen to your useless theories. You know I'm right. If we don't end up dying in here, we might end up as invalids," the guy named Lilith argued. Listening to the two of them arguing, Han continued to scan the area to see if he could spot any monsters near them. Based on how far away he made this ability be able to detect other creatures, there were no signs of monsters in the area. This served only to annoy him, but not to the degree of opening up the map and researching where the monsters were. Considering how he wouldn't be in a dangerous situation, to go that far would be like skipping to the end of the movie instead of watching events unfold. Once they reached the junction, Han's group was one of the ones that went first and entered the tunnel. The size of these tunnels was mind-boggling, being so massive deep underground and not caving in. He wondered whether there was something that the monsters did to the ground to increase the structural integrity. With the ruins on top, it would make sense for the entire network of tunnels to cave in on itself. As he was contemplating all of this, Brittany said, "Master, I have received a report from Anaklis and Alasia. They informed me that they discovered a nest, and upon entering it, they did not see any monsters until they entered deeper into the nest. Deep inside, there were thousands of monsters resting in the caverns. To figure out the strength of the monsters, they made a noise and caused the monsters to flood into the tunnels. They are still inside the nest fighting off the monsters, but there is no worry of being overrun. After they finish exterminating the nest, they request to come to Master's aid." "Did they mention how strong the monsters were?" he asked. "They said that defeating each monster took a little bit of effort, but nothing they could not handle," she answered. Hearing the report, Han looked around and increased the distance of what he could detect. Doing this wasn't something he wanted to do, but considering the new information, it was probably better to err on caution. As if looking at a densely populated city at night, from space, there were thousands of red lights that appeared. Placing a palm on his face, Han felt a massive amount of annoyance. Not only were there monsters, but the number of them was also beyond the expectations of the teacher. Not only that, the monsters caused the Jungle Sisters to put in a little bit of effort, meaning they were beyond the capabilities of these students. Han understood that if nothing was done, there would be a massive number of casualties, even if the teacher stepped in. Han Yun was only an A-ranked adventurer, so expecting her to defeat thousands of monsters was ridiculous. Looking at Celine, he said, "We need to go back. We need to talk to the teacher." "What are you talking about?" the guy who was arguing with Lilith asked. "There was a miscalculation with this mission," he said to the guy. "What miscalculation?" he asked again, sounding a bit worried. "I have the ability to sense monsters, and what I am sensing is beyond what we can handle," Han lied to the guy. He could flat out see the number of monsters inside of this nest. As long as they went back to the junction, they would likely succeed in not alerting the monsters. Seeing that his group had stopped, the Vanguard group stopped and looked at them curiously. Walking back to them, one of the teams approached them. Based on their equipment, this team was composed of nobles. "Why have you stopped?" the leader demanded, expecting to hear a reasonable explanation for this delay. Lilith looked at the noble and said, "This guy thinks there are monsters in the direction that we are heading towards." With the way he was speaking, it was evident that he didn't believe Han and didn't want the attention of the noble. Seeing this kid place all the blame on him, Han sighed. Based on the noble's attitude, something bad was likely to happen. There are not just monsters ahead of us, but their numbers and strength are greater than what we expected. He tried to reason with the arrogant kid. "All the better. Instead of fighting against weak monsters, is it not better to fight against something you can test your strength against?" He mocked Han, insinuating that Han was a coward. "Let us just leave this coward behind," a pretty noble girl suggested. Based on the lack of melee weapons on her, Han surmised that she was a mage. Though she was outwardly cute, in a sexy schoolgirl kind of way, her attitude was somewhat lacking. The other teams that were part of the Vanguard started to voice their agreement. In leaving Han behind and how they could handle a couple of weak monsters, Han did a facepalm, debating whether he should just leave these people to die. Even if he could defeat the monsters, it didn't feel like it concerned him. There were a couple of students that voiced their need for caution, and how they should just go back and get the teacher's decision. It was these people that convinced Han to stay. It would be a bit unfair for those with common sense to die because of some overconfident individuals. The mage that agreed about leaving him behind spoke up saying, "We are the nobility. Since we were children, we were trained to be able to defeat monsters. Even the teacher confirmed that the monsters in this nest were within our ability. I know that with my skills, I'd be easily able to defeat some monsters. Watch and learn, you commoners. I, Celestia Ignalis, will show you the difference that exists between us." Immediately, she began to chant a spell. "I call upon the powers of Hellfire to turn asunder all those who stand in my way. Bolt of hell flames!" Everyone stared as mana swirled around her and transformed into flames. The students near her started to back away, and upon unleashing her spell, they watched the intense fire shoot out to the nearest tunnel wall. There was a loud noise and the explosion that resulted from her spell. Once the fire and smoke died out, there was a large crater remaining. Students started to clap in amazement at the strength of the spell performed. For commoners, seeing such a strong spell was a marvelous thing to behold. Han groaned as he watched the bolt of fire streak towards the tunnel wall. This is why no one liked those who were pampered since birth. Even on Earth, people hated how wealthy families acted as if they had some divine providence, and often led to massive company scandals. Looking at the red dots in the distance, he saw that they had begun to move towards them. Turning towards Celine, Han said, "You need to take your sister and head towards the entrance. If you are able to reach the entrance, I want you to start heading back to the safety of the city." "What do you mean? Why do I need to take my sister to the city?" she stammered, her eyes showing that she was confused by the situation. "There is no time to discuss this. You need to take your sister and run now," he yelled at her. Shocked by Han raising his voice, she nodded her head and took her sister. The two of them were running the way they came, though it would take some time to reach where the primary force was waiting. He didn't even bother telling her to report what was happening and run back to the city, because there was nothing that could be done. The hornet's nest was toyed with, and now the hornets were angry. "Now, you understand that with us nobles here, there is nothing for you commoners to worry about," the girl arrogantly proclaimed. Basking in the cheers of her fellow classmates, they hooted and cheered, making a lot of noise with their enthusiastic cheering. Initially, there was only the sound of the students, but slowly a rumbling noise could be heard. It was very faint and distant, but slowly it rose in intensity like an approaching storm off in the distance. The cheering began to fade away as people realized that there was some kind of noise which was getting louder. A few of the classmates looked at Han, looking for answers. He casually raised his hand and shoulders and said, "It might be a good time to run."